Hi, I'm Amy Schroeder, and I'm a content strategist and writer and entrepreneur. I spent the bulk of my career publishing a magazine called Venus Scene, which covered women in music and the arts and DIY culture. Most recently, I started an organization called DIYBusiness Association, which empowers and connects creative small businesses. And I also freelance as a copywriter for most recently Levi's and West Elm. I don't know. I just kind of think of my life and my career as like this ongoing story, and I just love adding new things to it. And right now, I think of myself as an entrepreneurial writer because I love to get things going. I love the startup process, and I love figuring out how to write about products, businesses, and services. So.
Have you ever had to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but like if I'm thinking about, like, let's say someone they have a business and it's making money, but it's not a creative business, or it's not something that involves a lot of writing or producing content. What advice would you give to someone who's not really there in terms of the value of what that does to a business?
So the value of adding content to a business, I think, well, in this day and age when every company has to have a website, they have to have an online presence, you have to figure out how are you going to draw people to actually go to your website. Mm-hmm. And people aren't going to go to your website unless there's something there to read or look at, meaning there's got to be some sort of content that's interesting for them. So that's why content strategy has become so invaluable in the business world right now. Is trying to figure out how do you create something that people actually want to read or look at, meaning it could be words or images or photos or videos that basically adds value to their life. Maybe it's an informational product, maybe it's entertainment. That's what content is essentially. Because as we all know, as consumers, we don't want just a product shoved in our face necessarily. We do want to know what the product is or the service is, but if there's a way to provide other content or information or resources that adds value, meaning maybe there's 5 tips for how to use this product, or 5 examples of people who already have used this product, or 5 ways that this product or service is better than anybody else's, that kind of a thing that helps the consumer, the reader, to understand why your product or service is awesome.
If someone isn't kind of already doing this, what do they need to do? Like, what are the steps to prepare, and how prepared do you have to be when you are kind of getting to this new arena?
I actually have 4 steps.
Awesome.
That, I have this content strategy 101 that I like to help people with. So I don't know if you want me to go into that, or maybe we could break it out in chunks or something.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you start, and then we'll see if we can talk about each one.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Okay. So first let's talk about what content strategy is. Mm-hmm. I think for some people maybe it sounds like a little bit technical. And it kind of is, but it's kind of not. To me, it's kind of more just about creating good stuff that people want to read. So I have a definition for content strategy, and that is it's a plan for creating and positioning awesome content. And by content, we mean words, images, or video, so that people are immediately drawn to whatever content it is that you have, and then they're also inspired to do something. I think if you're good at doing content strategy, your content will be at least one, if not all of these things. It'll be interesting and inspiring, engaging, original, and useful.
So that's what content strategy is. So what are your tips for getting into content strategy?
So the first tip that I have, or the first chunk of content strategy 101, is you have to know who you are. Mm-hmm. Which for some people it's really easy. They know right out the gate, I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what my business is. I'm very confident about it. If so, great. You've already nailed the first step. But for a lot of people, really knowing who you are or what your company is or is all about is difficult, especially when you're in startup mode. So let's talk about knowing who you are first, especially because one of the coolest parts of crafting an online identity or brand is that you get to create the best version of yourself or your business. In short, you are who you say you are on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you declare that you're an amazing knitter or an experienced developer who knows Brooklyn like the back of his hand, or you're a fashion writer with expertise in accessories, your reader is really likely to believe you, especially if you can back it up with examples of your work and credentials on your website. So the first thing for Content Strategy 101 is to make sure you have a clear idea of your personal or business identity.
But you always hear this advice given in business classes, and especially marketing classes. Well, you have to know who your audience is, you know what I mean? How much of it is knowing or planning to target a niche or an audience, and how much of it is just being true to yourself and letting the audience come to you?
Wow, great question. I think it's both. And that's one of my pieces of my content strategy is knowing who your audience is. And of course, when you're first getting started, you don't have an audience yet.
Right.
So you don't know exactly, you don't know who they are because you haven't met them yet. But hopefully you've met or you know who your ideal target audience is. And I think that comes with being a person like you who's already involved and engaged in the startup tech Brooklyn creative communities. You already have a whole bunch of contacts and you already have taught classes and you already have a general idea of who your audience is. And then from there, you kind of maybe try to narrow it down to a few key components so that you're able to create your content or your brand or your business so that it's catered to that, a particular demographic. And I think it's a great starting place, It's good to know, for instance, you want to target somebody who's around 20 to 30 who is generally creative or has some tech know-how and they maybe want to start a business and they need some help, as opposed to, say, a 70-year-old who has never been online,
right,
who has no interest in, right? That would be a different demographic altogether. So I guess here are some things to think about when you're thinking about your ideal audience, customer. First, ask yourself some questions like, how old is your customer? Where do they live? What are they interested in? Are they interested in like ice cream or concerts or traveling, etc.? What kind of work do they do professionally? Are they teachers? Are they web developers? Are they unemployed? Just start thinking about who your ideal reader is and what they do for a living. About how much money do they earn, because based on how much money they earn, you'll be able to figure out how much money they have to spend on your product or service. And also you need to figure out how much does your reader or customer know about your particular product or service? Do they know absolutely nothing about it, or do they know a little bit, or are they already experts? And so based on how much they know about your product or service, you'll be better able to produce content for them, and you'll be able to nail the right kind of voice. And so once you have an idea of what your ideal demographic looks like, I recommend putting a picture in your head of what that person looks like. A lot of times, like in copywriting or book writing, the author has a picture in their head of what that person looks like or persons. And it's interesting when you start to talk to your writers, you should ask them, what does your reader look like? And this is always kind of fun to hear. Because I remember when I worked for an agency, when I was working for Levi's, they actually spent a lot of time creating these fake personas for their ideal target customers. So they had like a man and a woman, they had a real picture of that man and a woman, and they had material that really described how much money they spent, where they lived, what they.
Wow. Okay. So we've talked about audience. So what is another sort of step for content strategy?
Yeah. I think it's important to know your product or service like the back of your hand and be confident about it. And with that confidence, you'll be able to attach a clear price tag to your product or service. And don't be afraid to either put that price right on your website, or even if you're not feeling comfortable about putting that price tag on your website, know what it is at least, so that if people email you and ask you, what are your rates, you're able to very quickly send them an email, like a menu of services, or, basically listing out your prices. I think that in this day and age, people know that every single website out there has or should have an agenda. Even blogs have agendas. Even, people just writing their personal narrative. There's some sort of agenda, meaning they hope that they're telling a good story so that you'll keep reading, so that maybe you'll tell your friends about it, so that maybe their friends will come to their website and read your blog, and they can build an audience, and then maybe they'll get a book deal. So that's like an example of something that doesn't have a price tag on it, but at least there's an agenda. Yes, okay, so the fourth thing is create content that's easy, meaning easy on the reader's eyes and easy for you to produce. And easy to produce is really important, because myself, for instance, I tend to get in over my head with projects. I tend to get really excited about them and tend to take on way more than I can actually chew. So that's why I'm very serious about trying to encourage people to create content that's easy to produce. And I'll talk about that in a second. But first I want to talk about how people read. So think about yourself. How do you perceive or read content? Like when you're reading magazines or the New York Times online or in print, billboards, blogs, what captures your interest? Start thinking about that as you're starting to read content. My guess that there's one or all the following things is what captures your interest. There's either a beautiful or captivating image. There's an engaging headline or statement, or it's just a topic that you care about. So right off the bat, that's what content strategy is all about, is how are you going to get people interested? And usually it's about a really cool picture or an interesting headline. And especially in this world of where people have short attention spans and there's gazillions of media outlets, we have to constantly think about making a really good first impression so that people actually want to click on whatever it is that you have, so that they'll read the information that you're presenting. And then the next thing is keeping your content simple, so that you don't burn yourself out. And so when I think about this, I encourage people to go for the low-hanging fruit, meaning right at the top of your head, what are you really good at? What do you know that you for sure can produce with ease and with expertise or with quality? I think a lot of people, myself included in the past, tend to overcomplicate things and think, well, I'm going to write, something that I've never done before, or write about, to try to create content about something they know nothing about, thinking that it'll drive traffic to their website. That's probably not a good idea, because that means you're going to do a lot of research and a lot of work. Whereas if you're covering a topic that you know like the back of your hand, or you have a lot of resources around, or you have a great network involved with, that stuff that you're probably going to do the best job with creating content for, and it'll be easy for you and you won't burn yourself out, so that you'll probably continue to create more content, and that's the name of the game.
Well, thank you. I don't know, is there anything you want to add?
I started a blog called thevenuslady.com.
Oh, okay. And it's live and people can see it?
Project.
Awesome.